So, hello, we are Grupa Ee from Ljubljana, Slovenia, and we are filming this video for Walker Institute. I don't know what date is today. It's March.
It's 30th March, Thursday.
And the weather is not nice.
We will talk about our latest work in past few years, mainly about three identities that we found very interesting, and they were all ongoing projects. We want to talk about the process of building, losing, deconstructing, and rebuilding visual language in an oversaturated world.
Specifically, we'll talk about identities that are long-term collaborations for three cultural institutions: Glej, Steirische Herbst, and Mladinsko Theater. So, Glej Theater is Slovenia's oldest independent theater, founded back in 1970s. It's an experimental venue that offers young and up-and-coming theater creatives a space to explore. So it was already 40 years of history of the theater when we started working with them.
Glej started in a bar where we were just talking about what Glej is, and we actually made the whole identity in a bar without drawing anything, because we realized that the identity for Glej is not actually visual, but it's audible, because Glej means look. And we said, okay, so let's make the identity that said look theater, look title of show. Okay, so let's make the identity that works in the same manner if it's spoken on the radio or if it's written on the poster. So then we decided, okay, if we want something so clean that it sounds the same on the poster as on the radio, we have to put all the graphics aside and use only the most neutral typography with just simple lettering.
So the name of the theater is so strong that it needs nothing else but the word mark in its purest form. So these first years at the beginning were only like black posters with big letters, big titles: Glej Scream, Glej Exploration, Glej Explosion.
Glej Whore.
Glej Butcher Shop.
Glej title of the show.
Yeah.
So the beginning was almost somehow like scraping the identity to its barest form, this wordplay. Also the leaflets were very done in a very organized, structural way. So the main part that we can play or show our identity is through posters on the street, or when people come to the show and take the leaflet, and also through the windows on the street where people are passing by.
Slowly people realize that, Glej, something is going on in Glej, so that there is a new identity, there is a new artistic direction, so there was a curiosity.
So anyway, after a while, we decided we want to change something with this identity. Somehow we thought we did what we wanted to do with it, and we said, so okay, let's try adding some colors, let's change it a little bit. And then the idea was actually to try to shift it towards something else, and after that to try deconstructing it and destructing it, so like to, in the end, to try to make the complete destruction of the identity, so that somehow through the years we leave the house without the visual identity and leave this job to someone else to make it from the beginning again. Also, the concept was like, okay, I will do something in my file, then I will give it to Damjan. He can do something, whatever he wants, and then Mina can do whatever she wants. And we would finish the booklet or the poster or something that we wouldn't like really know what in the end will happen and what any of us would do. And to take this approach even further, then we decided, okay, we go to Stane to print this book, and we don't know what paper he will have in the print house. So we will say, you choose what you have there. What's that? Take this. And then we usually print one color, two colors, and then we would say like, what was the last color you used for another project? And he would say like, it was orange. Okay, use that orange, you know, or you pick up the color that you like, you know. So leaving these things, you know, not to have the control on what you do actually, but somehow you kind of control how things dissolve. One interesting project for me was this one book that we did. It was also like very short timing. We had to do it in one day, and we said like, okay, you just make the PDF from a Google Doc and we will put it in the book. So it was actually designed by the people that wrote it in the Google Docs. And then we just added some batch photos to it that we did, and just sent it all to the printer and told him to use some colors.
You come to this theater not maybe because you know who is the director or the actor playing there, but because you know that you're going to get a unique theater experience.
Identity of Steirische Herbst is constant development. Each year we need to rethink how to deal with it, what is going on around us, how to communicate this, and it was many surprises. The biggest one was the pandemic time, but yeah, it's a live form, so it's really, it moves constantly.
You discover new perspectives through the lens of art, and that it has a critical eye, a critical topic that changes every year, from pre-apocalyptic hedonism and the rise of fascism to global paranoia caused by the pandemic to proxy wars. So it always somehow contextualizes what is happening locally and globally.
How we started working on the logo, which is actually the denial of the logo itself. So we just used the word mark Steirische Herbst and we put the strike through it. Actually, the word mark Steirische Herbst resembles the old word mark logotype that was used in the beginnings of the festival. I think it was used just normal Helvetica font. And by putting the strike through it, we said, okay, we are not the same festival that you think we are. We are something different. We will do things differently than you are used to. that we use these big black shapes that we are putting over the word mark written on posters in many lines, and it actually had the same meaning, like to say like, okay, that is over, so we are here, we are new black hole. And this cut, you know, that we use for the logo, so we also used it for the first iteration of our font that was made for the festival, where we used Noah Haas extra bold, I think, or some other grotesque type, that we just cut it in half and squashed it, so we got this special font that was had this weird feeling of destruction and some interesting forms happening that we used all over for the festival.
So
Okay,
for the Grand
I'm the
Hotel
best
Abyss, we find inspirations for uncanny symbols inspired by Biedermeier furniture, paired with the concept of Austrian Genuss, which means pleasure. So the end result is creepy, uncomfortable identity suitable for the end of the world, because when we say Grand Hotel Abyss, we immediately think of one hotel at the end of the cliff abyss, the uncertainty of apocalyptic time and comfort of living.
Yeah, but it's also important that when we started work, we couldn't predict what we'll do the next year. We only knew that we could make layering. Somehow. We didn't know how. So we'll develop it later.
I really liked working on this edition because I could use my knowledge from VJing on raves and working with software that specializes in live visuals modulations. So I could incorporate this knowledge and making headlines, TV intros. When I started to work inside this program, I made okay, the end of the world is here. This program is self-generating titles. So I made this video that is like 45 minutes or 1 hour long of glitching and trying to emulate what it would look like if the computer took over somehow.
And the fun was that we actually then used these things from the VJing software for the print. So it's all started in InDesign, making 3D objects in layout software, putting it to VJ software to make some videos and to make some title scenes out of it with some unexpected results, and then putting all this back to the graphics software and to the print production, to the booklets, to the posters, to book itself.
And for example, I really loved our collaboration with Peter Schloss for The Way Out, the next year edition,
Peter made really great upgrade of it in the Steirischer Herbst. What is it?
Visitor center.
Visitor center, yeah.
Yes.
So we somehow then was a transformation from his work to our work, which was our work was on the first floor and his work was on the ground floor. This is an European measurements. I don't know how it is in United States.
I mean, last year edition of the festival, it was called Ein Krieg in der Ferne, meaning a war in a distance. We just went back, you know, to these shapes that had this destruction in itself, destructive dynamics, and we used like actually the explosion of them for the main symbol. So it's actually the exploded first year, you know.
Again, somehow like deconstructing.
Yeah, in a way we actually deconstructed the first year's identity.
I don't concern myself if something is supposed to be beautiful or right. It's really good to have this kind of clients that also let you break all the conventions, you know, let you dissolve things.
Don't stop me, even though I make some mistakes. The next project we'll talk about is Mladinsko Theater, based in Ljubljana. The difference between Mladinsko and Glej is in size. If Glej it's really small theater, Mladinsko is a proper national theater house with ensemble and 2 stages, and it's quite well known in Slovenia, and it has really rich history, especially in the 80s, when the theater, along with music, visual, and even graphic design, was crucial for building critical rebellion against the Yugoslav political establishment back then, against the communist regime. And Mladinsko was one of the theaters that were key players at that time.
Our approach was to use the bird as the symbol and to give it a free space, actually to give it the whole freedom to fly wherever it wants to fly. So our identity is here and the bird is wherever the bird wants to be.
Also because it's the icon, it's the legend, the bird is really known.
Yeah.
And so we took the bird but made it contemporary with our use of typography.
I mean, and the font that we used was Swiss type Euclid Flex that had like a lot of these stylistic sets that were just like really ready-made for what we needed. So I mean, we can like really say that this typography was like a ready-made object for our identity. we just used it and we tried these sets and we said, oh my god, look, this is like some comedy, this can be horror, this can be tragedy or whatever, and it was like really just, it was just there, it was just, so we just used it and we're still using it. We and also they think about the design as an extension of their critical agenda. So it's not only the design that serves as the promotion of the theater and the shows that are happening there, but they're also using like the poster and advertising actions to give questions to the society, actually to communicate with people also on through other media, not only the stage appearance. At the same time, there was happening the denial of identity, but maybe not through the design itself, but through the slogans that we used and that we were making together with them. So we usually work together on the campaigns and actions. We have our ideas, they have their own ideas, but in the end, it's their voice and they say what they want to say.
What we are looking now, that was quite strong campaign against the right-wing government that was in power at that time.
And nationalism that became more and more visible in media landscape. This also referred to the big campaign that was going on just before our independence.
In the 80s. The theater itself is very political, involved in society. So also the communication from theater, you know, the outside communication with the audience on the street level, you know, through posters, it's quite strong. Yeah, but also the format, I remember we talked to Goran, and I remember when he found this manifesto from 1985, we decided to create theater booklets, which is something in Slovenia, each show in the theater has a booklet, but normally it's a size of a book. And he said, I don't want books, I want...
pocketbook.
Or pocketbook, yeah. He said, I don't want a book. This doesn't have anything with the theater show. I need a newspaper, you know. I want a manifesto newspaper. And we also translated some things like the fourth wall of the theater. If it goes down, how could we translate this into a layout? Okay, let's go out of the margin, so let's oversize the sorry, I'm oversizing. Sorry.
In some cases, the photography on Mladinsko posters is like really very present and important for the process. And I like to do it myself because it's different than working with a professional photographer, where you know what you can expect from photography, but we use it in more experimental way, in a way that we don't know how it will be used, you know. So some posters are done on the rehearsals, just taking pictures of the space and the lights from that end up on the poster in the end. For the theater play Idiots, I went taking pictures, just running around the stage and shooting with the camera without knowing where I shoot. Yeah, I think this synergy between the client and the designer is a thing that we really like and
Value.
value.